Imagine pouring your heart and soul into a high school history project, handing it to your teacher with sweaty palms and getting slapped with a mediocre B-. Now, imagine that exact same homework assignment becoming the most recognizable national symbol on the planet, proudly planted on the surface of the moon, printed on billions of t-shirts, and saluted by the most powerful military in the world. Yes, the current 50-star American flag was designed by a 17-year-old kid who barely passed his class. But that is just the tip of the absurd iceberg we are about to crash into. In this third and final episode of our deep dive into the weirdest American truths, we are going to explore how the United States and the British Empire almost started World War Z over a single hungry pig, and how a literal portal to hell has been burning out of control under a Pennsylvania town for over 60 years. Do not forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and prepare your brain for the most counterintuitive, mind-bending historical facts that prove reality is always funnier than fiction. Let us rewind the clock to 1958. The political landscape of the United States was shifting as Alaska and Hawaii were on the verge of officially becoming the 49th and 50th states. Up until that point, the American flag only had 48 stars, neatly arranged in a rectangular grid. Anticipating this massive change, a high school junior named Robert Heft from Lancaster, Ohio, was given a history assignment. While his classmates were probably writing boring essays, Robert decided to do a practical arts and crafts project. He took his mother's sewing machine, cut up an old 48-star flag, and spent 14 agonizing hours painstakingly stitching together a brand new design featuring 50 stars arranged in alternating rows of 5 and 6. He proudly marched into class and handed his masterpiece to his teacher, Stanley Pratt. Mr. Pratt looked at the uneven stitching, the slightly crooked stars, and lack of professional tailoring, and unceremoniously handed Robert a B-. The teacher told him it lacked creativity and literally said, "If you can get Congress to accept this design, I will change your grade to an A." That was a challenge Robert Heft took incredibly personally. He sent his homemade flag to his local congressman, who then passed it along to President Dwight H. Eisenhower. Out of thousands of professional designs submitted by graphic artists, vexillologists, and government agencies, President Eisenhower took one look at the 17-year-old kid's sewing project and said, "Yes, this is the one." The design was officially adopted as the national flag of the United States in 1960. And, true to his word, after his student completely bypassed the educational system to change the course of American history, Mr. Pratt had to swallow his pride and change Robert's grade from a B- to an A. It is the ultimate story of petty academic vengeance leading to global historical impact. From a teenager schooling his teacher and the President of the United States, let us shift our focus to how the actual adults in charge handle high-stakes international diplomacy. Specifically, let us look at how two of the greatest military superpowers on Earth almost completely annihilated each other over a piece of walking bacon. If you read history books, wars usually start over assassinations, invasions, or the collapse of treaties. But in 1859, the United States and the British Empire mobilized warships, infantry, and heavy artillery because of a potato-eating pig. Welcome to the Pig War, a bizarre border dispute that took place on San Juan Island, a piece of land situated right between the U.S. mainland and Vancouver Island. At the time, both American settlers and British employees of the Hudson's Bay Company claimed ownership of the island, and they were living side by side in a very tense, awkward neighborhood dynamic. One morning, an American potato farmer named Lyman Cutler woke up to find a massive black British pig rooting through his garden and happily munching on his prized potatoes. This was not the first time the pig had trespassed, and Cutler had finally lost his mind. He grabbed his rifle and shot the pig dead. When the British owner of the pig, an Irishman named Charles Griffin, found out, he was furious. Cutler offered to pay $10 for the dead animal, which was a fair price at the time, but Griffin demanded $100, an astronomical sum. Cutler refused, declaring that his potatoes were worth more than a British pig. The British authorities immediately threatened to arrest the American farmer. In response, the American settlers panicked and called for military protection. The U.S. military sent Captain George Pickett, a notorious hothead who would later become famous in the Civil War, along with 66 soldiers to protect the potato farmer. Pickett loudly declared that he would rather fight the entire British Army than let them arrest one American citizen. The British governor of Vancouver Island did not take this insult lightly. He immediately dispatched 3 heavily armed Royal Navy warships, mounting over 80 heavily loaded cannons and hundreds of Royal Marines to the shores of the island. For months, the 2 massive armies stood entirely deadlocked. The Americans were dug into the hills, heavily outnumbered and outgunned, staring down the barrels of British naval artillery. The British Marines stood on the decks of their ships, waiting for the order to blow the Americans into the stratosphere. The standing orders for both sides were incredibly strict. Do not fire unless fired upon. It was an intense, sweating, terrifying game of global chicken, all to avenge a farm animal that had already been turned into fertilizer. Eventually, the news of this absolute circus reached London and Washington, D.C. The top officials of both governments were utterly horrified to realize their rogue commanders were about to trigger a massive, bloody international war over a dead pig. The British sent Admiral Robert Baines to take control of the situation, and when he arrived, he looked at the standoff and famously declared that it would be absolute madness to involve 2 great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig. Both sides slowly backed down, signed a joint military occupation agreement, and eventually let the Kaiser of Germany arbitrate the final borderlines. The pig war ended with 0 human casualties, making it the most hilariously peaceful war in history, though it was certainly a very bad day for the pig. The pig war was a fire that was thankfully put out before it could spread and destroy the world. But back on the mainland of the United States, in the state of Pennsylvania, there is a very real, literal fire that the American government started and has absolutely failed to put out for the last 6 decades. We are talking about an environmental disaster so terrifying and apocalyptic that it served as the real-life inspiration for the creepy horror video game and movie franchise Silent Hill. Let us travel to the town of Centralia. In the 1960s, Centralia was a bustling, happy little coal mining community. In May of 1962, the town council had a seemingly brilliant and completely harmless idea. Memorial Day was approaching, and they wanted to clean up the local landfill to make the town look nice for the holiday. The problem was that the landfill was located inside an old, abandoned strip mining pit. The fire department decided the fastest way to get rid of the garbage was to simply set it on fire, let it burn down to ashes, and then extinguish it. They lit the match, the garbage burned, and they sprayed it with water. They thought they had done a great job, but they made a catastrophic, town-destroying miscalculation. They did not realize that the garbage pit was directly connected to an unsealed vein of highly flammable anthracite coal. The fire did not go out. Instead, it slowly crept downward, deep into the earth, and ignited the massive, sprawling labyrinth of abandoned coal mine tunnels that ran directly underneath the entire town. At first, nobody noticed, but slowly the ground started getting uncomfortably hot. Smoke began pouring out of random cracks in people's backyards. The air started smelling heavily of sulfur and toxic carbon monoxide. The terrifying reality set in when a local gas station owner, John Coddington, inserted a dipstick into his underground gasoline storage tanks to check the fuel level. When he pulled the stick out, it was too hot to touch. He lowered a thermometer into the tank and discovered that the gasoline sitting directly under his gas station was boiling at a staggering 172 degrees Fahrenheit. He was basically sitting on top of a massive ticking bomb. The final straw happened when a 12-year-old boy named Todd Domboski was playing in his grandmother's backyard. Suddenly, the earth simply opened up and swallowed him. A massive sinkhole, spewing deadly carbon monoxide and intense heat, had collapsed right under his feet. He managed to grab onto a tree root and was pulled out by his cousin, narrowly escaping being roasted alive. After that, the government realized they could not fight the fire. It was too big, too deep, and burning too hot. They spent over $42 million to buy out the homes, demolish the buildings, and permanently relocate the residents. Today, Centralia is a ghost town. The roads are split open, dead trees cover the landscape, and toxic smoke continually billows from the cracked, melting asphalt. Geologists estimate that there is enough coal trapped underground to keep this accidental hellfire burning for at least another 250 years. While the ground in Pennsylvania is literally melting the shoes off anyone foolish enough to walk there, deep beneath the polished marble floors of Washington, D.C., the ground is being used for something completely different. It is hiding a secret, highly exclusive transportation network built solely because American politicians really hate walking and sweating in their expensive suits. We are talking about the United States Capitol subway system. If you have ever visited Washington, D.C. in the middle of summer, you know that the city is built on a swamp. The heat and humidity are absolutely oppressive, making you feel like you are walking through hot soup. Now imagine being a senator or a representative. You were sitting in your private office building when suddenly the bells ring, signaling that a mandatory vote is happening on the floor of the Capitol building. You have exactly 15 minutes to get there. But if you walk outside, your pristine designer suit will be soaked in sweat, your hair will be ruined, and you will have to make small talk with tourists and journalists. To solve this incredibly privileged first world problem, the government built a private underground train system back in 1909. It connects the Capitol building directly to the House and Senate office buildings. At first, it was just a couple of battery-powered electric cars that looked like fancy golf carts. But over the decades, using millions of dollars of taxpayer money, it has been upgraded into a fully automated, sleek monorail system. It is essentially a highly exclusive, multi-million-dollar Disney World theme park ride designed strictly for lawmakers. The trains are completely free to ride, but you can't even get close to the platform unless you are an elected official, a high-ranking staff member, or a very lucky member of the press. There are even strict rules about who gets to sit where, and the operators are trained to hold the doors open if they see a powerful senator sprinting down the hallway. It is a hilarious testament to the fact that the people who run the country have a secret air-conditioned sci-fi transit network buzzing right under the feet of the regular citizens who are stuck outside dealing with traffic jams and public bus delays. Speaking of buildings with bizarre architectural and geographical features, what if I told you there is a building in North America where you can technically commit an international border crossing just by walking from the fiction section to the romance section? If you want to travel from the United States to Canada, you usually have to drive to a heavily fortified border checkpoint, hand over your passport to a stern-looking officer, answer a bunch of serious questions about why you are visiting, and maybe get your trunk searched. But there is one magical place where the border is nothing more than a strip of black tape on the floor, and the only authority figure you have to fear is a librarian telling you to be quiet. Welcome to the Haskell III Library and Opera House. This beautiful historic building was constructed in 1904, and it was intentionally built to sit perfectly on top of the international borderline, separating the town of Derby Line in Vermont, USA, and Stansted in Quebec, Canada. The wealthy family who funded the construction wanted to provide a center for learning and culture that both communities could share equally regardless of nationality. The layout of this building is a geographical masterpiece of confusion. The front door of the library is firmly located in the United States. However, the circulation desk where you actually check out the books is located in Canada. A thick black line runs diagonally right across the wooden floor of the main reading room. If you are an American citizen, you can legally walk through the front door, stroll past the black line, cross an international border without a passport or a visa, browse a bookshelf in a foreign country, and then bring the book back across the line to sit down and read it in an American chair. Upstairs, the building features an incredible, fully functional opera house. The stage where the performers sing and act is located in Canada, while the majority of the wooden seats where the audience sits are located in the United States. This means you can sit in America and watch a Canadian play without ever leaving the room. Because of this unique situation, there are no armed Border Patrol agents checking IDs inside the building. The only requirement is that if you enter from the U.S. side, you must exit back out onto the U.S. side when you leave. It is the most peaceful, nerdy, and wholesome international border on the entire planet, proving that sometimes a good book is powerful enough to erase the invisible lines drawn by governments. We have covered teenagers designing the national flag, massive armies threatening each other over a dead pig, a town that accidentally set itself on fire for eternity, secret underground trains for politicians, and a library that breaks the laws of international travel. But do not close your browser just yet. The weirdness of America is far from exhausted. In the final part of our journey, we are going to look at the staggering, terrifying amount of pizza Americans consume every single day. A river so short you could accidentally jump over it without even realizing you just crossed a body of water. The historical scam of buying Alaska for pennies. The reason the iconic Golden Gate Bridge was almost painted like a giant bumblebee. And the shocking truth about the official language of the United States. When you think of American agriculture, you probably picture endless fields of golden wheat waving in the wind, towering stalks of green corn stretching across the Midwest, or massive apple orchards covering the countryside as far as the eye can see. But there is another crop that Americans harvest and consume on a scale so incredibly massive, it actually requires land measurement units just to comprehend the sheer volume. I am talking about pizza. If you were to take all the pizza slices eaten by Americans in a single day and lay them completely flat on the ground side by side, they would cover an astonishing 100 acres of land every single day. To put that ridiculous, mouth-watering number into perspective, 100 acres is roughly the size of 75 professional American football fields. Imagine standing at the edge of a massive farming estate, looking out at the horizon, and instead of seeing grass or dirt, you just see an endless, greasy ocean of melted mozzarella cheese, shimmering tomato sauce, and millions of slices of pepperoni slowly baking under the sun. That is the exact amount of pizza the United States devours every 24 hours, which breaks down to roughly 350 slices being eaten every single second. Before World War II, pizza was largely unknown outside of tight-knit Italian immigrant neighborhoods in cities like New York and Chicago. But when American soldiers returned home from the European campaign, they brought back a desperate, insatiable craving for the cheap, cheesy flatbreads they had survived on while fighting in Italy. The demand exploded overnight, and today the pizza industry is a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut that dominates the culinary landscape. It's practically the unofficial vegetable of the American diet. You can find it in elementary school cafeterias, late-night college dorms, and high-end gourmet restaurants. The fact that an entire nation eats a medium-sized farm worth of pizza every single day is a hilarious testament to their absolute obsession with convenience, comfort food, and melted cheese. From measuring fast food by the acre, let us move on to a geographical feature that is so laughably small you might actually step over it without even realizing you just crossed a body of water. When we think of famous American rivers, we imagine the mighty Mississippi splitting the country in half, or the raging Colorado River forcefully carving out the magnificent Grand Canyon over millions of years. But tucked away in the city of Great Falls in the state of Montana is a river that completely ruins the majestic, powerful reputation of American waterways. It is called the Roe River, and it once proudly held the official Guinness World Record for being the absolute shortest river on the entire planet. How short is the shortest river in the world? From the exact moment the fresh water bubbles up from giant springs to the exact point where it empties into the much larger Missouri River, the Roe River measures a pathetic 201 feet long. That's barely over 60 meters. You could literally stand at the source of this river, pick up a rock, and throw it completely past the end of the river without even warming up your shoulder. You could probably hold your breath and sprint the entire length of it before you even needed to exhale. But the absolute funniest part of this story is not the physical size of the river, but the intense, petty drama surrounding it. Before the Roe River claimed the title, the world record belonged to the Dee River in the state of Oregon, which measured a slightly more respectable 440 feet. In the 1980s, a group of 5th grade students in Montana measured their local stream, realized it was shorter, and launched the massive, aggressive campaign to steal the world record. The people of Oregon were furious and furiously tried to remeasure their river at extreme high tide just to make it seem shorter on paper. The two states engaged in a ridiculous, highly publicized battle over who had the most insignificant, underwhelming stream of water. Eventually, the people at the Guinness Book of World Records got so incredibly annoyed by the constant bickering, whining, and remeasuring that they completely eliminated the shortest river category altogether, leaving both states to argue over a puddle. Speaking of measuring land and water, let us talk about the greatest, most ridiculously disproportionate real estate transaction in the history of human civilization. If you want to buy a tiny, cramped one-bedroom apartment in New York City today, you will probably have to spend well over $1 million and practically sell your soul to a bank. But back in 1867, the United States government managed to buy an entire frozen subcontinent packed with unimaginable natural wealth for the laughably low price of about 2 cents an acre. I am talking about the historic purchase of Alaska from the Russian Empire. At the time, Russia was recovering from a disastrous, expensive war in Crimea, and the royal treasury was completely broke. They looked across the ocean at the massive, icy wilderness of Alaska and decided it was an undefendable, useless block of ice that was only good for hunting a few sea otters. Fearing that the British might just march across the border from Canada and take it for free, the Russians offered to sell it to the United States. The American Secretary of State, William Seward, eagerly jumped at the opportunity and signed the check for $7.2 million. Today, that sounds like the absolute steal of the millennium, but the American public and the media absolutely roasted him for it. They aggressively mocked the purchase in the newspapers, calling it Seward's folly, Seward's icebox, and President Andrew Johnson's polar bear garden. Politicians angrily argued that it was a criminal waste of taxpayer money to buy a frozen wasteland where absolutely nothing could grow. For years, Seward was the laughingstock of Washington, but history delivered the ultimate billion-dollar punchline. Just a few decades later, massive deposits of gold were discovered in the Yukon, triggering the legendary Klondike Gold Rush. And if the gold was not enough to make the critics look incredibly stupid, they later found oceans of crude oil, vast reserves of natural gas, and billions of dollars worth of timber and commercial fishing rights. That barren Russian icebox turned out to be one of the wealthiest pieces of land on the planet. The Russian Empire basically handed over a winning lottery ticket for the price of a cheap cup of coffee, and William Seward went from being a national joke to the greatest real estate legend in American history. From the frozen, lucrative shores of Alaska, let us travel down to the sunny, foggy coast of California to look at one of the most iconic and frequently photographed structures ever built by human hands. When you close your eyes and picture the city of San Francisco, the very first thing that pops into your head is the majestic Golden Gate Bridge, soaring over the bay with its brilliant, striking orange-red color. It's a masterpiece of Art Deco design and structural engineering. But if the United States Navy had gotten their way during the planning phase, that beautiful bridge would look like an absolute nightmare, and it would probably give you a migraine just looking at it. The San Francisco Bay is notorious for its incredibly thick, blinding fog that rolls in from the Pacific Ocean. During the construction of the bridge in the 1930s, the U.S. Navy, which operated massive, expensive fleets in the area, was terrified that their warships would accidentally crash into the gigantic steel towers on a foggy night. So the military brass approached the architects with a completely practical but aesthetically horrifying demand. They wanted the entire bridge to be painted in alternating bright horizontal stripes of solid black and neon yellow. They essentially wanted to turn this billion-dollar marvel of modern engineering into a gigantic floating bumblebee or a massive industrial hazard sign. The consulting architect, a man named Irving Morrow, was absolutely appalled by this military suggestion. He thought the black and yellow stripes would look incredibly tacky, cheap, and completely ruin the natural, sweeping beauty of the landscape. Ironically, the iconic color the bridge wears today was never supposed to be the final color. When the massive steel beams arrived from the foundries on the East Coast, they were coated in a reddish-orange lead primer just to protect them from rusting during transit on the ocean. Morrow took one look at that temporary primer paint and realized it was absolutely perfect. The color, officially called International Orange, was highly visible in the thick fog, which satisfied the Navy, while also beautifully complementing the warm colors of the surrounding California hills and contrasting perfectly with the blue ocean and sky. He aggressively fought the military, kept the primer color, and accidentally created a global architectural icon just by refusing to paint over the rust protection. We have talked about massive amounts of pizza, tiny rivers, frozen real estate scams, and brightly colored bridges. But for our final, ultimate fact to close out this series, let us look at the most fundamental aspect of any nation's identity, its language. If you ask anyone around the globe what the official language of the United States of America is, they will look at you like you are completely crazy, roll their eyes, and say English, obviously. It is the language written in the Constitution, the language spoken by the president, and the language exported to the world by Hollywood. But here is the most shocking, counterintuitive truth of all. The United States of America does not have an official language at the federal level. You read that correctly. Despite being the most wealthy and influential English-speaking country on the planet, there is absolutely not a single line in the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, or in any federal law that declares English as the official, legally binding language of the nation. When the Founding Fathers were sitting in a hot room drafting the rules for the new country, they intentionally left the language question completely blank. Why did they do this? Because right from the very beginning, America was a massive, chaotic melting pot of immigrants from all over the world. In the late 1700s, the streets of early American cities were filled with people speaking German, Dutch, French, Spanish, and dozens of Native American languages. The leaders realized that forcing everyone to speak one single language by law would go directly against the very ideals of freedom and liberty they had just fought a bloody, exhausting revolution to secure. They believed that a true democracy should not dictate how its citizens communicate in their homes or in their daily lives. Over the centuries, several politicians have tried to pass laws making English the official language, but they have always failed at the federal level. So, legally speaking, if you want to walk into a federal courthouse and demand to fill out your tax forms in Latin, Esperanto, or even the fictional Klingon language from Star Trek, the government cannot arrest you for using the wrong language. It is the ultimate expression of American freedom, a country built by so many different voices that it legally and stubbornly refuses to pick just one. And there you have it, from towns packed entirely into a single building and cats trained as multi-million-dollar spies to naval fleets bought with sugary soda and a country that doesn't even have an official language. The United States is a massive, beautiful, and utterly confusing experiment of history, geography, and human stubbornness. We have explored the deep, weird cuts of American lore that prove reality is always far more entertaining than whatever dry facts are written in the textbooks. Thank you for joining me on this massive 3-part, 6-episode deep dive. If your brain is slightly melted but fully entertained, do not forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends so they can learn why they should never put ice cream in their back pockets. Until next time, keep questioning everything and stay curious.